exactly the way I wrote it. I really appreciate that. So, I always start my talks with a hearty thank you, and there are about 40 people in this room to whom I'm deeply grateful. It is an absolute pleasure to work with a first-class organization that shares my passion for helping entrepreneurs, and the work you did to pull this event off, especially with the storms and everything last night, really needs to be recognized. So please give EO Minnesota a rousing round of applause. My favorite thing to do is speak to a room full of busy entrepreneurs who know that no matter how busy they are, getting together with fellow entrepreneurs, helping them learn and grow, and learning and growing yourself is worth the investment of time and energy. So I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy lives to be here today. It also means everybody in this room has seen people like me speak millions of times, and I've got about 30 seconds to convince you the next 75 minutes is not going to be a complete waste of your time. So I want to start with an overview of what we're going to cover today, and then a simple promise. First of all, I am going to walk through at a very high level what EOS is for the handful of you who may not know that yet. A show of hands, how many of you are running your businesses on EOS in this room? Warms my heart. How many of you are familiar with EOS but not running your business on it? And then is there anybody here who says, EOS, what is that? Is that lip gloss? Is it a camera? What's going on here? Okay, so that's just good for me to know. A couple other questions I have for you. How many of you own or run the business that you're here representing? Okay, almost everybody. Is there anybody here who does all the work for the person who just raised their hand? Okay, good, a handful of those. It's always nice for me to know to whom I'm speaking. So quick EOS overview followed by a deep dive into, wait for it, the process component. You'll get more on why I said it that way in a minute. So what I'm going to cover on strengthening your process component is the commitment required for this vital activity. I'm going to help you learn how to do it well, and I'm going to help you walk out of here with a specific set of tools and action items that'll make it work for your business and enthuse you about this vibrant topic, process. So here we go. Quick EOS overview. As Brian mentioned, EOS is just a simple way of operating a business that helps the owner, leader, and leadership team get on the same page with the company's vision, gain traction by instituting discipline and accountability throughout the organization, and become a more cohesive, healthy, functional leadership team. And we always describe what a company running on EOS looks and feels like using a little tool in the workbooks in front of you. Please feel free to whip this out. If you're taking notes, just write all over it. We have extra copies if you need more. All of the stuff in this book is available for a free download from the EOS Worldwide website, so please write all over it. And that EOS model says that all businesses have 6 key components, 6 things that you're either really strong at or not so strong at. And where you're strong, things are humming along beautifully, and where you're weak, that's where issues are created. And so I'm going to walk through those 6 key components real quick. A truly great company is strong in its vision component. And by that I mean the owner and the leadership team is 100% on the same page with where the company's going and exactly how it plans to get there. A company that's really great is strong in its people component. How many of you have people in your business? Anybody? I'm so sorry. I will see if we can get the happy hour to start a little early. But to be strong in the people component, you need to attract and retain truly great people. And what EOS helps you do is define what a truly great person looks and feels like to your unique organization, and then hire, fire, review, reward, and recognize people using a standard process and a set of simple tools that attract the right kind of people to your organization and repel everybody else. A company running on EOS works to strengthen its data component. And so the data component is learning to run your business on facts and figures, a handful of numbers, objective information, rather than the subjective feelings, emotions, egos, and vague sensations of greatness and doom that so often drive the way we make decisions in an entrepreneurial company. And when you're strong in the vision, people, and data components, what happens is your organization becomes transparent. All of its impurities and weaknesses get smoked out, and that brings us to the fourth key component, which is the issues component. You're going to have issues. And so strengthening the issues component is all about learning to identify your issues early on, get them on a list, prioritize them, and then set them up, knock them down, and make them go away forever, rather than letting them linger for weeks, months, sometimes even years, hoping they go away on their own. Really solving them at the root for the long term and greater good. A company that's strong in the process component gets the most important things in its business done the right and best way every time, even when we're not there to ensure that happens. And so most of us entrepreneurs are guilty of occasionally seeing something important that needs to get done. And even when we give it to somebody else to do, we have a tendency to hover over them, worrying it's not going to work out right. And then we might nudge them out of the way and do it ourselves because, it's just so scary to delegate. But strengthening your process component will really help you learn to let go of the vine and get those important things done consistently well. And the thing I'm going to share with you today is that when you implement EOS and you're working to strengthen your process component, we're not talking about a 750-page SOP manual and rigid rules where you got non-thinking robots running around your organization. What I'm going to share with you today is our 20/80 approach to strengthening your process component, getting the basics done really well so you can elevate your leadership and management up into the really important, vital, human stuff that makes a great entrepreneurial company hum. The sixth key component is traction, and traction is about discipline and accountability, the ability to focus on the right things and get those things done with real discipline and accountability every week, month, quarter, and year. That's traction. So how many of you who own and run your business heard me talk about traction just now and thought to yourself, focus, discipline, and accountability. Everybody else in my company needs that. How many of you? Okay, because I'm coming for you. The people who struggle most with focus, discipline, and accountability in an entrepreneurial company are the founding entrepreneurs. We love shiny stuff. We love new things. We love innovation and disruption. We love conquering an obstacle that we haven't been able to conquer yet. And so focus, discipline, and accountability can coexist with innovation, creativity, and disruption. And companies running on EOS who are setting the standard in their industry for future thinking are demonstrating that every single day. When you're implementing EOS, you're working to strengthen each of these six key components using a scale of 0 to 100%. We actually measure progress on the journey together with our clients. And so I'm always asking my clients to assess strength and weakness in each of those six key components along the way. And we're shooting for 100%, but we know 100% is impossible. There's never been a company and never will that's 100% strong in all six key components. The goal is 80%. If you can get to 80% strong in the six key components, you're running a truly great business. You're still going to have issues. You're going to have a quarter or two where things aren't working out exactly the way you want, but you're going to feel in control of your business. Thus the title, Get a Grip, of the first book I wrote with Gino. Now, let's talk about the process component, and I want to make sure that you are crystal clear on what 80% or better looks and feels like in the process component. 80% strong or better in the process component. How many of you running on EOS that raised your hand earlier think that you're 80% strong or better in the process component? If you had to self-assess, you'd say you're 80% or better. Okay? That confirms the deeply steeped research I've done on this topic. 100% strong in the process component can be best described or defined from question number 16 in the organizational checkup we use to assess strength or weakness in each of these components. And question number 16 says, our core processes are documented, simplified, and followed by all to consistently produce the results we want. So let me itemize those things. Documented. Raise your hand if your core processes, the handful of really important things you think need to be done the right, best way every time, are documented in some way. Okay? How many of you, leave your hands up if you think those core processes are simplified? You've beat out all the extra stuff, there's no redundancy, you've automated what you need to automate, you're sure they're current. Okay? How many of you think everybody in your organization is consistently following all of those documented, simplified? Okay, point made. And so I have spent the last 7 years thinking about this issue because my clients struggle most with the process component. It's starting to piss me off. And so what I did was I started self-assessing my clients in the process component when they were assessing themselves, because a lot of them rated themselves at 85 or 90% in the process component, but then when I asked those specific questions, they all did the same thing you did. Oh yeah, no, they're not really documented. They're definitely not simplified. Nobody's freaking following them. In fact, I don't even know where they are. Okay? If I were to guess at the accurate representation of how strong my average client's process component is, it's about 55%, and the rest of the implementers who are here will confirm this. Because I've interviewed dozens of implementers on this subject, and the truth of the matter is, this is the case because of one thing and one thing only. It's a great quotation. It caused me to write this book, Process exclamation point. There is a little sarcasm in that. With my co-author Lisa Gonzalez from Denver, Colorado, whose small world happens to know Jack Daly really well and loves him, and I'm so excited he's here to watch this talk being delivered for the very first time in this group. And so here's the quote. Yippee! Let's strengthen our process component. Now, who said that? No entrepreneur ever. Okay? It's your mindset. It's my mindset. It's the implementer community's mindset. We're not excited about the process component. We're all entrepreneurs. Hell, we started our businesses to avoid process and bureaucracy. Why the hell would we spend time and energy on this? That's the issue. And so this book is a how-to manual, but it's more of a call to action for the people who founded their business and who think, I believe mistakenly, that they don't need process, or they're not naturally process-oriented, or process is only for big corporations. That's what I'm going to share with you for the next 60 minutes or so. So let me walk you through this tool Lisa and I created to help teach entrepreneurs how to strengthen their process component. We call this diagram the process. And we spent a lot of money branding that, Jennifer, just so you know. And there are really 3 things we're teaching in this book. The first and most important is commitment. You will never strengthen your process component if you, as the owner, leader, or member of the leadership team, don't feel it's vital and important. And that's all mindset, and I'm going to change your mindset today. The second part of the book is all about learning the very simple, practical tools we teach for strengthening the process in a way that is palatable for entrepreneurial leadership teams, a 20/80 approach. And those 2 major tools are called the 3-step process documenter and the FBA checklist. And I'll walk you through those tools, and I'm going to throw in a bonus tool as well. And so let's get started with commitment. The very end of this talk, I'm going to help you take action with some specific steps, but we're going to get started with your mindset, because if your mindset isn't right, you're not ready to learn and you're not ready to act. So here we go. Commitment is all about your mindset, and I think your mindset is anti-process oriented for two reasons. You subscribe to a set of myths about process that are incorrect, and you're minimizing the potential benefits of strengthening the process component. And so I want to undo those two things over the course of the next 15 minutes or so. So here are some very common myths built on my relationship with somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 entrepreneurs over the course of the last 15 years. Myth number one is process is not in my nature, or I'm not process oriented, or it doesn't come naturally to me. How many of you believe that in your heart and soul? I'm not a process guy or gal. How many of you would agree with that? Okay? So I feel like I scared you into not raising your hand, because I know at least 80% of the room would really raise their hand there. And so here's the point I want to make. When I ask the question this way, I usually get a different response. How many of you think that one of the reasons you've built a successful business is that you just have this natural tendency or knack for when you're going through your day or your week or your hour, noticing what seems to be working and noticing what seems to cause problems, and just automatically discarding those things that cause problems from your daily regimen and repeating the things that really work well? How many of you think you're hardwired with the natural tendency to do that? Quit doing stuff that hurts and do more of the stuff that works. How many of you feel that's the way you're hardwired? So I actually think 100% of the people in this room are hardwired that way. Here, let me ask you a couple very specific questions. How many of you have to commute to work on a non-COVID day? Okay, I should have some people who do the work for all the owners of their businesses in the room. The number would be high. When you go on a regular drive, do you just figure out how you're going to get there willy-nilly differently every day, or have you figured out the right way to avoid traffic and congestion and other things that frustrate you, and you do that repeatedly, right? We're all hardwired, but that's natural process orientation. You quit taking the route that's painful, and you err on the side of the route that you're able to predict is going to work out well. That's natural process orientation. So one of the things that makes me so confident in this belief is the reason the human race exists today is because of natural process orientation. Process orientation doesn't involve manuals, training programs, or compliance committees. Okay? That's what all the people who get paid a lot of money to strengthen companies' process components believe needs to happen to make this work. But human beings exist because our ancestors learned to avoid the stuff that killed them and do more of the stuff that kept them safe, like sleeping together in shelters, leaving somebody awake to alert them if a predator were in the area, etc. That's all natural process orientation. It is survival of the fittest. And then you bring some tools along that can be co-opted by other human beings, and all of a sudden we've got a society and civilization and all that stuff. Humans are naturally process oriented. Your business. How many of you realized early on in the growth of your business that something you were doing wasn't working and maybe had to make a major strategic change in your business model, the way you hired people? How many of you have done that at least once in your business? Again, almost everybody. Businesses do not survive without natural process orientation. Process orientation meaning I notice what works, and I try and do more of that, and I teach the people around me to do more of that. And I notice what doesn't work or what causes pain, and I try and avoid that. All process component strength work is codifying that natural tendency we all have. You are, in fact, naturally process-oriented. Unless you're not human, which may apply to a handful of people in this room, I'll let you judge. So, the truth, process is in your nature. Here's another myth. Yeah, I understand the importance of the process component, Pete, but it seems like so much work. It's going to take so much time. How many of you believe that in your core? God, when am I going to find time to strengthen my process component? Well, I'd like to start with a quote from one of my favorite people to quote on the planet, John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach. He's famous for saying, if you don't have time to do it right, when will you find time to do it over? For goodness sake, mistakes cost time. And so there's a wonderful story about John Wooden that all of his ex-players like to tell. And John Wooden was like the greatest college basketball recruiter in the history of the sport. Everybody who was a great high school basketball player wanted to play for the guy. And so all these famous people like Lou Alcindor or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would show up for their first meeting with the coach in their freshman year, and they'd be all excited about what Wooden was going to share. Maybe it's going to be a, hard-working scrimmage, or he's going to teach us some amazing strategy about basketball, or get inside our heads. You know what he did with his teammates? Spent an hour telling them how to put on their socks and tie their shoes. You know why he did that? Because back in the day, the shoes were pretty crappy, and the socks had a tendency to fall down. They were always the tall socks with the 2-colored or 3-colored stripes on them, with the real short shorts. Sorry for that visual, everybody, especially you guys sitting down front. But he taught them to put on their socks and tie their shoes, because a blister on your big toe might mean you're going to miss 2 or 3 games. And if I can't even get you to tie your shoes properly and put your socks on right, how am I going to teach you how to play the game of basketball? And that lesson that he taught was there's no thing too small to be deemed important, and there's nothing you can't systemize if it makes a difference in your business or your life or the game you're about to play. When you don't have a process, that's what costs time. So how many of you wish you didn't get sucked into the day-to-day in your business as much as you have to? Okay? Clients ticked off, I got to talk to the client. Employees disgruntled, I've got to regruntle the employee. Okay? The reason the owner and leadership team members get called into the day-to-day is there's not a consistently followed process for executing the basic day-to-day stuff in your business that you can teach your people quickly and efficiently so they know the basics themselves, and they only call you when they can't figure out the basics, the stuff between the basics. Okay? So it's lack of process that costs time. The other thing I want to teach you to help bust this myth is that strengthening your process component actually takes a lot less time than you think it does. I keep saying this 20-80 thing over and over again, and so here's what I mean with that. Most of us have this picture in our head of what a strong process component looks like, and if we subscribe to all the process literature that's out there today, it's a 100 approach to strengthening your process. It's document 100% of the steps in 100% of the processes to get 100% compliance. And we have an inherently negative view of that definition of what strengthening the process component really means. And I've got entrepreneurial leadership teams who will fight with me in a session. You're my leadership team today, and you are unruly and dysfunctional, just so everybody's clear. And they'll fight with me. And they'll say, but Pete, what's the point of a process that's only 1 page with 6 steps in it? I mean, this is so much more complicated than that. We need to document every step with every ounce of detail or it's worthless. And they'll argue with me. Just teach them how to do the basics well. When you're teaching a kid how to play t-ball, you're not exactly trying to explain to a 6-year-old how to hit a split finger fastball on a 3-2 count with men on base. You just don't do that. You teach them the basics first. That's the 20-80 approach. Do 20% of the work that gets you 80% of the results. When your basics are done consistently well, even by a brand new employee, because you've done the hard work of documenting and simplifying your processes, and you're using those documented, simplified processes to train your people, and I'll explain how to do that with the FBA checklist later, it's actually going to save you time. You're not going to get sucked into the day-to-day. And now all of a sudden, if you are a creator, innovator, or disruptor, you're going to be able to reinvest the time you're using redirecting or coaching and mentoring your people into things that are creative, innovative, and disruptive. That's what strengthening your process can do. So I can't say that it isn't going to take time because I need you to commit to investing the time. What I can say is it takes some time, not anywhere near as much as you think, and it's worth it. So here's myth number 3. Process destroys freedom. Who believes this in your core? Well, I could either run a company where everybody's free to figure it out themselves, and that's what I like to do, and I want to hire people like that because I don't want a bunch of non-thinking robots in my business. How many of you believe and subscribe to that theory? Okay, good. I have completely browbeat you into never raising your hand again. Very common. The perception is, in fact, Elon Musk is quoted as saying processes are for big companies who don't hire people that can think for themselves. Okay? And so I totally get where this belief might come from if you have a little bit of it in you. However, it is absolutely incorrect because process actually creates freedom in all the ways I just described. If you don't have to teach a brand new person how to answer the phone or serve a customer or deal with a problem or keep a number on track or whatever it is that person's job is to do, there's so much more time and freedom for you to create, innovate, and it is just absolutely a truth that I've watched happen over and over and over again on the rare companies that are 80% stronger, better in the process component. And so please, I beg you, if you subscribe to any of these mistaken beliefs that create part of your anti-process bias, know that they're just not true. They're myths, pure and simple. I also don't think we do a particularly good job, and I want to make a case here. I want you to hear me say that I'm as much teaching to my fellow EOS implementers and myself here. This is self-medication for me because I have not done a good job selling my longtime clients on the value of strengthening their process component. And so here are the benefits just real quick at a high level. When you have great processes, you are going to beat your competition when it comes to attracting and retaining talent. When you have crappy processes or no processes, you will not. And the easiest example that's being talked about a lot in social media and in the business media these days is the length and complexity and discomfort of the hiring process. But that's only a teeny little part of it. Like, if it takes you 9 weeks from receiving an application to scheduling your first interview with a prospective candidate, you've lost, right? So that's an easy one, but there's a million other things. If your managers are really good at leading, managing, and driving accountability, people are going to stay longer. If you're really good at figuring out when to hire and what kind of person is going to be successful, you're going to have a greater success rate. There's a million different ways a strong process component can help you attract and retain better people. And I've been all over the world talking to entrepreneurs from all different kinds of businesses, and not a one of them would disagree with the statement that the biggest problem we all face is finding and keeping talent. Benefit number 2, you will grow faster. When your marketing and sales processes are documented, simplified, and followed by all, you're going to attract more interest and convert more leads into one business than a company without a strong marketing and sales process. When your account management or customer service or customer retention process is baked, or your production or manufacturing or supply chain process is baked, you're going to keep your customers happier longer, and as a result, you're going to grow on a bigger piece of booked and retained business. That will help drive profits up, as will the many cost-saving benefits of a strong process component. Fewer mistakes, fewer errors, less lost customers, more efficient systems and processes, etc. Happier customers I've already covered. Here's one that we don't talk about a lot. I find my clients who are weak in the process component, that's the root cause for weakness they have in lots of other of the 6 key components. So for example, if you feel you have to solve the same people issue multiple times in an area, like you keep hiring people, they fail, you fire them, hire another person you think is going to be great, and they fail again, root cause 9 times out of 10 is either you're just really bad at hiring people, or your process that you would have that person follow isn't documented, simplified, or followed by all. Here's another example. If you don't understand what leading indicators to put on your weekly scorecard, your process component being weak is probably the root cause. Because leading indicators come from activities-based numbers, and if you don't know what activities lead to the desired outcome, you don't know what to put on your scorecard. Here's another example, the issues component. My clients who are trying to solve a vexing issue like sales off track will start by looking at that EOS model. And they'll say, well, I think the problem is, or we ought to do this, or we're going to go do that, or in 1979 this happened, and I'll just say, whoa, wait a minute. Are we about to solve a vision problem? In other words, we don't know who we're selling to and what our value proposition is. Are we about to solve a people problem? The leader of marketing or sales isn't the right person. We don't have the right structure. Our salespeople aren't very... Are we going to solve a process problem? I ask those questions. And when the answer is, I don't know, it takes them 5 quarters to solve the issue. When the process is documented, simplified, and followed by all, you know it's not the process component. You're going to go right to the root cause faster. That's what helps you IDS your issues faster when your process component is strong. This doesn't get talked about very much, but a lack of process gives your competitors an advantage over you. Even if you're being successful today, and a common argument for why we don't need to work on our process component right now is Jim Collins' great quote, good is the enemy of great. Hey, we're growing, we feel pretty good about the way we're hiring and keeping talent. We don't need to prioritize our process component. Things are, in general, that's how that 80% conversation, well, in general, everybody does everything the right and best way, so we don't need to do this work. And so the example I'll share with you to motivate you to take action if you think things are pretty good right now is imagine you owned a taxi cab company about 15 years ago. And you had 100 drivers in some major metro somewhere that were dying to get an opportunity to be a taxi driver under your umbrella, like say a yellow cab driver in New York City. 15 years ago, if you wanted to be a cab driver in New York City, you had to buy a medallion, and that medallion cost $1.8 million. Do you know what it costs today? $180,000, 10% of its original value, or its previous value. And the reason is Uber and Lyft. And Uber was started, say what you will about Uber, there's all kinds of negative things we could say, but what I want you to focus on is process here. The opportunity to create Uber stemmed from antiquated, ineffective processes for driver recruiting and retention and passenger service in the taxi cab company, because the 2 college buddies that started Uber after having to pay $800 for a surge pricing taxi cab or a limo because they couldn't get a taxi cab to come. And any of you who are old enough to have used taxi cabs when they still existed understand the pain we were in when you tried to get it. It was ridiculous. Like, you call a number that's on every taxi cab as though somehow calling the number would get you a ride. And then you'd be on hold for an hour at a restaurant in downtown Minneapolis, and you just want to get home and you don't want to drive drunk, but you can't because nobody picks up the damn phone. It's crazy. And so all they did was say, hey, you know, this technology might simplify this a lot, and here we go. What's the value of Uber or Lyft today compared to the value of a taxi cab company today? It's crazy. So please don't let things get stale in your business just because things are good. Your competition is going to see an opportunity and beat you. That's an example of how having a strong process component creates a higher valuation for the business you own. Whether you want to sell it someday or not is immaterial to me. The motivation for this bullet point is my father, who sat me down early in my entrepreneurial journey when I was complaining about how I was too busy to join the family on a family trip. And he said, son, I got news for you. You keep describing yourself as a business owner. It sounds like you have a job and a really bad boss. Okay? If you can't step away from your business for a week or two and have the business still functioning well when you get back, you're not an entrepreneur. You're an employee and your boss is an idiot. Cut it out. Cut it out. A business is valuable when, without dependence on any of you, it's able to continue serving its clients and customers well, do quality work, deliver real value, and make money. And if the only reason it's able to do that is you, the person who wants to buy your business someday really should just hire you to work for them. They're not going to pay anything for your business. That's why a strong process component is probably the single most important thing you do to increase the future value of your business, where it becomes an automatic, customer-happy, money-making venture, and you are the leader and the orchestra conductor, but you're not essential to the day-to-day. That's how it increases the value of your business. Last thing, and this might invoke a little cynicism, but a strong process allows you to live a better life. One of my early stage clients wrote an article and was on one of the TV news channels because she had a battle with cancer and had to step out of her business for 6 months, and she gave credit to EOS and specifically the process component for the ability to step out of the business and focus on her personal health. I've got clients who take sabbaticals to be with their family or take an entire summer off to go take their juniors around for college visit trips, which most parents who work their tails off, like everybody in this room, feel like if they can squeeze a long weekend in, it's great. And so if you want to be able to step out of your business for the pursuit of other passions, hobbies, or just because you need a break, a strong process component is essential. So now, level with me, please. I've just debunked 3 very common myths. I've just listed a whole bunch of reasons why you might work to strengthen your process component, despite the natural resistance you have for it. Is there anybody here who still thinks, yeah, no thanks? Okay, my mission here is completed. Let's move on to a little teaching. Oh, this is a great sum up of that whole point. In the book, when I talk about Elon Musk's statement, I combat it with Jim Collins' famous quotation, magic occurs when you blend a culture of discipline with an ethic of entrepreneurship. Magic occurs. And so he believes, and I believe it's true too, that discipline and entrepreneurship belong together. If you want to build an enduring company that sustains itself without you being essential to it, you need both. A culture of discipline with independently thinking people in it who are disciplined and accountable, and you need to preserve your ethic of entrepreneurship. And what this is all about is, if you're so busy answering the phone, cleaning up messes, and dealing with unhappy customers and employees, you have lost touch with your ethic of entrepreneurship. I believe a strong process component preserves your ethic of entrepreneurship so you can feel like the company you're running is still an entrepreneurial company and you're still allowed to function as an entrepreneur. In fact, you're most valuable to your company when you are functioning as the natural, instinctive, creative entrepreneur you are. That's what this is all about. So free yourself up to go do that by strengthening your process component. So now let's talk about how, because that's all great and it's a bit of a sales pitch and a motivational kick in the butt, but I want to walk you through the very simple process to do this the 20-80 way. And this is the last half of that diagram I showed you earlier. What I'm about to teach you are 2 EOS tools. The first is the 3-step process documenter, and we'll walk through that one step at a time. And the second is the FBA checklist. So these tools are in your workbooks, by the way, so feel free to write all over them. When we're identifying your handful of core processes and we're documenting and simplifying them, we are not trying to create 750-page SOP manuals. Even companies with those SOP manuals, because they're regulatorily required to have them, will say, if they're honest to you, we write the process manual for the auditor, not to teach our people how to behave every day. Okay? And so what we're trying to do is figure out in your business, what are the things that need to be done the same way every time, because that will create better results. And let's only document and simplify those things. The stuff where wizardry and creativity is required, please don't try and systemize that. Your process for that might be one bullet, and it's get the most creative people in our organization in a meeting room and have them ideate until they come up with a plan. That's a one-step process. It's fine. Don't try and systemize that. Okay? Systemize the stuff that you want to have done the right and best way every time. A great example of that is, I don't know, accounting. Are there any creative accountants in the room? What are they, lapsed? Isn't that what you are required to put after your CPA designation, Heidi? So that's the stuff we want to systemize here. That's Izzy Sharp, who founded Four Seasons Hotel. A great example of that is, if you go to a Four Seasons, it doesn't feel like a bunch of thoughtless robots. At a Four Seasons, their people, everyone, including the housekeeper and the maintenance people, are desiring to create exceptional experiences for their guests. But they build that ability on the back of process. So a great example is the 15-10-5 rule that they teach their front desk agents. When you're 15 feet away, make eye contact and smile. When they're 10 feet away, greet the person. And when they're 5 feet away, give your name and ask their name. Or better yet, if you know who it is, which a lot of people at a Four Seasons do, even if you only stayed there 3 years ago, it's amazing how they do this. They use your name without you having to tell them. Now that's an exceptional experience, especially post-COVID, where the service quality seems to have declined precipitously in the hospitality industry. That's what Izzy Sharp is talking about. So here's our approach. So first and foremost, we only document a handful of your core processes, not every process in the organization. And most of my clients have a list of core processes that are documented and simplified that include things like this: a people or talent process, a marketing, a sales process, a handful of operations or operating processes with unique names typically, an accounting process, not 27 accounting processes, and a customer service process. Now, those of you who are very detail-oriented will say, whoa, 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 there's so much more. Like, how can you have one process that describes everything we do for accounting? And what I say is, we've got one core process for accounting with 27 steps in it, each describing at a high level the right way to do the 27 things you want to create individual processes for. That's the teaching, okay? And so it's just a handful of core processes that belongs in a binder, a drive, on a video app that warehouses videotaped core processes. That's the trend now, and it's really cool to watch. I've actually seen an example of a VR process documentation deal. It's a partnership between Ford Motor Company and Bosch. Super cool. Before they ship their electronic Mustangs SUV, which is the weirdest looking thing I've ever seen, they realized they couldn't produce enough to get a car to every dealership. It was going to cost a bunch of money, and so they trained their technicians using VR that they were actually using these. It's really cool. So whatever method you need to package them, you're going to do that, okay? That becomes the table of contents. And then you move to step 2. Now, before you get to step 2, I'm going to urge you to do this. Maybe take a couple of notes. Identify your handful of core processes with your leadership team only in the room. Don't do it alone, and don't do it involving everybody in the organization. Because if you bring all your employees in, and you say to an employee who's your best salesperson, who's your best salesperson? Nancy. Nancy, you're our best salesperson. I'd like you to participate in a meeting where we document and simplify everything you do so I can teach everybody else in the organization how to do it just as well as you. Trust me, that conversation does not go well. Okay? Involve Nancy, get her feedback, let her push back, but I want the leadership team to own this. Okay? And you're going to ask the leadership team, what are the handful of core processes we need to document and simplify in order to change the way we operate around here for the better, develop more discipline and accountability. And you compile a list and you winnow it down, and you're going to settle on somewhere between 5 and 12 core processes is what I typically see. So that's the how on identify. Now let's move to document. So to document and simplify a core process, I'll give you some best practices in a minute. We simply ask you to take one at a time, put the person most familiar with the process who's a member of your leadership team on the project as its champion or owner, and have them document and simplify each core process, one quarter at a time, until you get through your entire list. So what that means is the end result might fit on 1 to 5 pages of detail if you happen to be doing a bulleted display like this. Here's a people process on 1 page, 6 major steps. Here's a sales process. Again, I'd say the average number of pages for my clients is about 2.5 pages in a typical entrepreneurial company. Enough detail that it creates clarity, but not so much detail that your employees never want to look at it ever. Okay? And then once you've got that whole set of documents or videos or images or workflow diagrams that you've documented and simplified, then you got to package them in a way that this is really complicated stuff. The people who are going to benefit from them most can find them easily and use them easily. And most of my clients who have done the hard work of documenting and simplifying struggle here the most. Where do we put them and how do we make sure they get used is a big challenge. And there's nothing more frustrating than that, which is again why I completely understand why you'd reject this whole idea. Because if you do all this work and it doesn't change the results you're getting, it's a waste of time. And so you do not want this work to end up in your bin of abandoned processes. All of us have one of those. So, some best practices. I mentioned this earlier. The leadership team must own it. Do not over-delegate or abdicate this to line-level contributors. Keep them involved and engaged. Allow them to push back and provide feedback. Don't give it to them to do for you. Keep things at a high level. Resist the temptation to be a complexifier. Detail can come later. What I'll sometimes say to somebody I'm arguing with this about is, have you ever been at a point in your life where you wanted to improve your physical wellness? Yes, all of us have been there. And if that's the case, there are two different ways you could do that. You could research nutritionists, and you could find the best personal trainer and the best facility, and you could do a European sedan version of that thing, or you could say, hey, I'm going to commit to 3 habits that are likely to improve my personal wellness. I'm going to step on the scale once a week and write down the number I see. I'm going to spend 45 minutes or more exercising 5 times a week, and I'm going to track my food on an app. That's a 3-step process, just as likely to be effective in helping you on your personal wellness journey as all that research and detail. So I want you to bring that mindset to this work. Remember that failure to launch means you don't get any benefit from the work you've done. Perfection is the enemy of progress. So be comfortable throwing your core process that's documented and simplified out there, rigorously following it and iterating and improving it over time. That is what we teach, and I think we do a poor job of explaining that, in that I'd rather have you following a basic, simple process that might not be perfect than waiting 2 years to get this work done, okay? When it comes to documenting and simplifying, this is the actual process. Step 1, observe. We are so busy that when somebody says, let's go document, simplify our core process, I get the question almost every time, well, how do I even get started? And the answer is observe. Block 4 hours of time. If you're documenting the sales process, ride along with a salesperson who's out making calls and watch what they do. And then ask yourself this question. Does every salesperson do it that way, or does everybody do it slightly differently? And if you're not sure of the answer, go watch the other salespeople and take notes. Don't try and fix anything right now. Just observe. Once you've observed and you're able to conclude whether or not you do or don't have a current way of doing these important things, then evaluate, but complete your observation first. And when you evaluate, what you're asking is this the right way to do it, or could it be simpler or better or less redundant or have fewer baton drop opportunities in it? And when you've answered all of those questions, you're going to be able to create a draft of a document that is simplified. It eliminates redundant steps. It creates consistency and discipline. That's what simplifying is. Look for opportunities to automate things that are done manually right now. Draft what you think the right process is, and then get your leadership team to approve it before you share it with anybody else. Because what you need from your leadership team is you need their confidence and support to change behaviors in your organization after you're done with this project. If your leadership team doesn't understand the way you think something important ought to be done, and they haven't said, yep, if Heidi doesn't say, yep, if I were still selling every day, I would do it that way, what's going to happen is somebody's going to not like the process. They're going to come to Heidi and say, hey, I've been told we're supposed to do it this way, and Heidi's going to go, I don't know where you got that. That's not right at all. And then bad stuff starts to happen. So get the leadership team on the same page. And then, I can't stress this enough, create the process in a way that it's going to be useful. If your employees work outside at job sites and are dealing with weather, and your processes are paper-based and 6 pages long, That's not good. Give them an iPad with the processes baked in there. Figure out how to package them in a way that it's going to be used. Those little tips will help a lot. One extra tip is a tool that's in your toolbox called the Getting What You Want tool. Husbands and wives, do not try this trick at home. Full disclaimer, you'll all need to sign a release when you need. This is just a simple way of documenting and simplifying a core process using what's typically packaged as a much more complicated approach called Business Process Management, or BPMN, and boiling it down to terms that I can understand well enough to teach it to others. It's just starting with the end in mind and working backwards to the essential steps in each process so that you're beating out all the dead weight and redundant steps and ball dropping and so forth. So please consider using that tool if you get stuck while you're documenting and simplifying. So now you've got a process manual or drive or video app that includes all your core processes. Now we've got to put them to use. And we use a tool called the FBA checklist for that. I'm going to walk through that one step at a time. Step one is you got to train your people. So a couple tips and tricks here. You must train everybody who touches even one step in the process. A very common question is, how should I conduct a training session? Should I do it virtually? Should I ride along? Is it coaching? Pick the approach you think is going to work best. You're an entrepreneur. That's what you do for a living. Whatever you think will work best, great, because if you follow the rest of these steps, you're going to know whether training worked or not. Make sure when you're training, you engage with and collaborate with your people rather than preaching or prodding or dictating. What seems to work best is a very humble, open-minded approach. Hey, here's how we think the sales process should be done consistently well. Poke holes in this is a great way to start the conversation. As I walk you through this, and I give you the logic for why we want to do each step this way, if you think something is just wrong, I want you to speak up. That's engaging and collaborative rather than, this is the way we're going to do things around here, and if you don't, you're fired. Your attracting and retaining talent situation just got a lot worse. Okay? Coach, mentor, manage, and collaborate. Once you've conducted an initial training session, you at least can move to step two. You may need to retrain over time. And step two is reinforcement of new behavior. So one of the fun research things we did was we talked about we researched why training succeeds and why training fails. And expert trainers will tell you it typically comes down to reinforcement, not the content of the training. And there's a great fact by a scientist that in 24 hours, the average human who's been in a 1-hour learning session loses 90% of the information they absorbed. That is about 7% higher than my actual data because I've tested this myself, but 90% they're going to forget. And so you've got to measure what you're training on. And you're going to measure three things. Yes, you're measuring compliance. Okay? But compliance doesn't mean there's a board and an inquisition team. Compliance means you're just measuring whether or not something important is being done right. That's compliance. Did they do it the way the process says? And so how many of you have heard from the people in operations or finance that the reason mistakes are made on something important in your business is because the salesperson didn't gather the details I needed or provide me what I needed on time for me to do my work? Have you ever heard that? I've heard it like 8 million times in the various businesses I've run. It's always the salesperson's fault. And so if anybody has a detail-oriented salesperson, please send them to all of my clients because they're looking to hire. Okay? So measure whether or not, if you want to change salesperson behavior, training will not do it, but measurement might. Measurement might. Okay? Measuring frequency is another thing you might do. So frequency is if you're a salesperson and you close 33% of your deals and you want to close 3 deals a month, that means you need to make 10 proposals a month or you're never going to hit your number. Okay? And so you might measure how many proposals I send out every week, and if it's not 25% of 10, you're off track, and now your salespeople can react faster to off-track sales numbers before they miss their quota for the month or the quarter. That's measuring frequency. And then the other thing you need to do is measure outcomes. So they did it right, they did it often enough, but did they get the desired outcome? And so who can tell me what happened? One of two things happened when somebody's personal scorecard said they followed the process, they did it often enough to get the desired result, but they didn't get the desired result. One of two things. Shout it out. Yes, sir?
People problem or process problem?
That might be true, but the people problem is what I'm looking for, and it's one of two things, Tim. It's either I lied to you about doing it often enough or doing it right, or I'm not skilled enough to get it consistently right. And in both cases, as a manager, you've got valuable data you can react to and fix. So that's why you want to think about which of those 3 things you want to measure. The third step in the FBA checklist is managing. You must drive accountability for following the process, doing it often enough, and getting desired results. LMA, as you EOS veterans know, stands for leadership, management, and accountability. And so you need to drive accountability for following the process, getting the results we want, and when that's not happening, coach them up, coach them up, coach them up, coach them up, and if you can't coach them up, you're going to have a tough people decision to make. That's the way this has to work. If there are no consequences for not doing this well, you can't keep tolerating it. What we tolerate, we endorse. Got to manage well. And then lastly, please don't create a dust-covered relic that is not useful in your organization. Once a year, we just ask our clients to whip out their core processes, sometimes more in a faster-moving business. Look for additional ways to simplify or innovate. Maybe the industry or something in your business has changed. Update them annually, and then restart the FBA checklist all over again. If you'll follow those 4 steps, and you've documented and simplified your core processes, your process component will legitimately be 80% strong. So, let's help you take action with the 8 minutes or so we have left. So remember, just follow this process. Here are the common obstacles you're likely to encounter. The most important is your lack of passion and enthusiasm for this work, and so please find a way to at least fake passion and enthusiasm. I'm a realist, guys. I don't think I've converted more than 4 people in this room, but you gotta at least fake it. I promise it will change your life for the better. And if I did really convert you, good for you, and let people see that passion and enthusiasm every day. A very common obstacle is this leadership team, this dysfunctional group of lunatics over here's refusal to own it. It's, yes, we've prioritized it, but I made it a rock for one of my direct reports and they didn't do a very good job, so oh well. Okay, you gotta own it all the way through the finish line, please. Number 2, you may have a legitimate deficit of skill or experience with process. And if you do, and you're running a growing entrepreneurial company, I would urge you to make this a hiring tenet for your next leadership team member. Whether it's sales, operations, or finance, the idea that only ops people are process-oriented is wrong. There are a lot of really effective sales leaders that are process-oriented, but consider making deep experience with process documentation and discipline one of the hiring tenets for your next leadership team member. It'll upgrade the skills and experience level of everybody on your leadership team. If you can't do that, There are millions of process consultants in the world. All I would ask you to do is two things. One, hire somebody with real experience in an entrepreneurial setting. Otherwise, they're going to bury you under all of the stuff I've just told you EOS companies don't do. Okay? And number two, do not make it their job. They are there to enable the leadership team's ownership of this project all the way to the finish. In other words, don't over-delegate, don't abdicate. Own it alongside the expert you're hiring to provide project management and technical expertise. A very common obstacle is that thing I mentioned earlier about the love of complexity and detail. When that happens on your team, the book Process has some pretty funny, at least I think it's funny, I hope it's funny. Lisa wrote most of it, so it has a small chance of being funny. But there's some great stuff in there that will help them understand why complexity is not needed right now, and it'll allow you to keep the project on track. Perfectionism is another big one. A lot of highly successful entrepreneurs are successful specifically because they are perfectionists by nature. And so you're going to need to let that go. And if you can't let that go on your own, that's what executive coaching and therapy is for. And for the record, if there are any executive coaches in the room, my definition of executive coaching is therapy, but in a way that sounds businessy. Over-reliance on technology, super common problem, especially today. How many clients have I said, let's go strengthen your process component? They say, oh no, we're going to buy an ERP or a CRM and that's going to fix it all. Are there any people in the room who sell ERPs and CRMs? So what I'm pretty sure you'll agree with is those systems work really well when the company that buys them knows how they want things done, and they don't work pretty well if they're relying on the CRM or the ERP to tell them how to do everything, because adoption becomes a real problem. So I'm not poo-pooing technology, I'm just saying don't expect technology to fix your process problem. Ineffective training. I would like somebody to start a training company where you pay instructional designers and trainers who are really good about $8 million a year for doing their job, because it is a wildly undervalued skill and discipline. And so please improve your company's ability to provide technical and other skills training. If that's an issue, get a solve for that in your organization. It's going to pay dividends way beyond this work. Ineffective leadership and management, which is often caused by an avoidance of or lack of accountability. People who don't want to be accountable themselves and as a result have a tendency to not want to drive accountability in others. If that's your issue, please read the book How to Be a Great Boss, which explains LMA. It's a very accessible approach to driving accountability in a company that's entrepreneurial and flexible and creative and where you care about the people you're leading and managing. And then my favorite is the kind of syndrome. And so that goes all the way back to the start of this talk. The kind of syndrome is where I say, are you 80% strong in the people component? And they say, well, kind of. And I say, well, let's go through this one at a time. Have you documented or have you identified your handful of core processes? Well, kind of. I mean, we got a list somewhere, and they all grabbed their leadership team manual and paged through to the page they were on when we did it 8 years ago. I'm pretty sure we have a list somewhere, but that's not doing it. Did you document and simplify the code? Well, kind of. And did you approve it as a leadership team? Well, we're mostly on the same page. Well, then did you use the FBA checklist? Have you trained anybody in on the process? Well, not really. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. So don't let that happen to you. Do the work. You got to do the work. It's like anything. And if this wasn't enough of a kick in the butt for you and you need more resources, the couple of things I'll tell you to do are, first of all, please use the discount code in your workbooks, and it'll be on the screen, and it's on the screen. There's bookmarks on your table that have this QR code. You'll be able to order this in advance for 30% off. Oh, that's that. I should leave that up there a little longer. Hold on a minute. And then use the EOS Worldwide website. All of the stuff I'm sharing with you today is downloadable for free, and we do not have operators standing by who are going to cold call you, so please feel free to go there. Please reach out to me or one of the other EOS implementers in the room. We love helping people with this stuff, and it's really fun stuff for us. Whether you intend to ever hire us or not, we don't care. We just want to help. EOS is piloting right now, beta testing a software application that runs the back end of an EOS implementation, and it will feature the contents of process as part of the tool set once it becomes a MVP quality application. That's coming in the fall, hopefully about the same time the book comes out. And then there's lots of other companies who do process technology really, really well. I just mentioned a couple of them that are notable. Trainual is a great company. I think the owner of Trainual is an EO member out of Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken. Whale.io, Playbook Builder, there are a bunch of them. If you Google it, you'll find it. Those are all valuable resources you might use. And then I'll leave you with one last thought from my beautiful and talented co-author, Lisa Gonzalez. Remember, if you want to be free running your entrepreneurial company, process doesn't destroy freedom. Process creates freedom, and that's why you started this damn thing in the first place. So go strengthen your process component. Thanks very much.